As I was reflecting on this theme over the last week, a few different kind of key threads really emerged for me. And the first one is what I would call different threads of reclaiming the self. And the first one is what I would call remembering our truth. And so I wanted to start with a quote that has really, honestly, it's probably one of the quotes I share most often, which is, queer people don't grow up as ourselves. We grow up playing a version of ourselves that sacrifices authenticity to minimize humiliation and prejudice. The massive task of our adult lives is to unpick which parts of ourselves are truly us and which parts we've created to protect us. Alexander Leon. So I don't know how to talk about womanhood and reclaiming the self without also talking about my queerness and more specifically, my transness. I do not believe that what we as trans women refer to as transition is really unique to us at all. As women in a cisheteropatriarchal world, I would imagine many of you grew up and were taught all of the ways in which you have to conform to that world simply because of how things are and how they have been for a long time. So this process we go through in our adult lives of unpicking which parts of us are true and which parts we created as defense mechanisms or necessities to navigate the world that we live in, I don't think it's specific to being trans or to being queer. I think it's something that we all go through. From a young age, we're fed ideas of what it means to be a woman. We have to look a certain way. We have to have a certain body. We have to be a wife. We have to be a mother. And the function that that serves is that it alienates us from our sense of agency, which is to say power. It alienates us from our ability to learn and decide what womanhood means for us. So the next kind of thread here is figuring out how to not replicate those dynamics and those systems of harm within our own spaces. And I'm sure many of us know Audre Lorde's incredible quote, "I'm not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are very different from my own." The reality is, who among us gets to define what womanhood should mean or look like for anyone else? And that's why in every space, but especially in spaces of sisterhood, it falls on all of us to ensure that this types of thinking is not at play and that we aren't replicating these dynamics. Because as Audre Lorde said, keeping other women in shackles will never ever lead to our own freedom. And we see this come up again and again and again outside of trans rights issues, but there is an old insidious lie that inclusivity will come at the expense of the larger group. But that's actually just a tactic meant to keep us divided. And all it really accomplishes is keeping us fighting each other rather than staying focused on the real systems of our own oppression. So the third thread, as was kind of alluded to in the course description, is the wisdom of biodiversity. Sherry Mitchell said, "Mother Earth is our first teacher. She has informed us that oneness does not equal sameness. She shows us this through the harmonious balance that is held in the rich biodiversity that exists within our world." When we start to break out of the idea that there is one way to be a woman, one vision of what a woman looks like, then we can begin to learn from the myriad forms of womanhood that actually exist. We can start to learn from each other. In every ecosystem, every arena, nature sings of biodiversity. Any species, any ecosystem will wither and perish without it. And sisterhood is an ecosystem. And the survival of that ecosystem is not hampered by, but dependent on all the glorious different forms femininity takes in our world. Because the reality is, all of our experiences of womanhood are different. Individualism is the focal point of so much of what is wrong in our world today. It's what keeps us thinking from a myopic perspective where we're only focused on our own problems and our own experiences and our own understandings of the world. But there's a key difference between individualism and individuality. Individuality seeks only to recognize the uniqueness of that individual. And when you apply individuality to collective thinking and collective organizing, that looks like, well, what can my specific story, what can my specific identity and my specific experience, my superpowers lend to this collective cause, to collective transformation? Your reclaiming of your womanhood, your power, yourself, which is to say your healing, is by no means small or inconsequential. In fact, it is massive. It is changing the world because you are the world. And that is the original binary, false binary, that is at the heart of environmentalism and so much else, that we could ever be separate from the world, that the changing and healing of ourselves could in any way not amount to the changing and healing of the collective. When you look at things cyclically, there has to be a sense of surrender that comes into your everyday life. And it's a beautiful sense of surrender because I've come to this place where I'm like, okay, when I feel like my feelings, my emotions, my hormones are like at a peak, I'm like, I know what this is going to be. It's probably going to be challenging. I'm probably going to have a breakdown at some point today, this weekend, whatever. And you start to create more space for allowing, as opposed to trying to force an experience onto things. And if you look at our world as it relates to the natural world, like we're in an era where, you know, the dominant powers that be have tried to force so much onto the natural world as opposed to letting natural cycles play themselves out. And I was actually talking about this with my team this morning about the seasons, because it's autumn here and in Brooklyn, and we were talking about winter and how winter can be so hard and it can be so challenging, and especially in a city, and you don't get to see nature and you feel depressed. And I have such a different perspective now on the seasons, because I'm like going into this winter, I'm like, yeah, I probably am going to be more depressed this winter, but there's also a time for that. There's a time for letting ourselves be heavy, to giving ourselves to the ground. Nature is literally in so many ways dying and withering away during that time of the year. Why would we be separate from that? And, you know, we could go into a whole conversation about the nature of suffering, but it's like, I think so much of our suffering isn't actually suffering, it's our resistance of the suffering, right? And it's not that winter is actually horrible, it's that our desire to make it, and so, like, no, I'm going to go out, I'm going to keep living my life, I'm going to trudge through the snow. Like, that's when we actually make things difficult for ourselves, but when we surrender into like, I'm going to stay in, I'm going to cook stew, I'm going to have a book, then it starts to become something totally different, and it feels so transformative. And I think cyclical thinking also is so much more sustainable, because in linear thinking, it's just grow, more, continue. And cyclical thinking is, there is a period for growth, but in order for this to be sustained, there also needs to be a period for decay, because we can't live at one place all the time. So I've really, you know, I live in a place with seasons, and so that's how I practice it a lot right now. Cyclical living is just being in harmony with what's happening in the world outside of me. I think probably every single person on this call has experienced at one point or another how powerful surrender is. And it really dives into, I think, what's at the heart here, which is, what is power really? Is power dominion over something else? I don't think so. And when you think about how much oppression women have faced throughout history, throughout today, and continue to thrive and exist and survive, how powerful is that? who really has the power in that scenario? Is it, because I think there's a difference between necessarily being the one in power versus being the oppressor, because it's an aspect of power. Domination is an aspect of power for sure, but there is such a strength in what surrender requires of us.
I just want you to feel the connection, first of all, with your own body. I had people talking about embodiment, and that's really what I just love. When we are present in our body, nothing will ever pass over us. So invite you to just feel your bodily sensation. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, because there's so much pain, right? Yeah, women have suffered so much. We have cried and pushed for babies and do so many things. And yet we are here still alive and strong. So, but though the trauma remains in the body. So this is why we need to always stay embodied. Feel all the sensations, we let them pass. And then we find a lot of treasure, a lot of pleasure inside in there. But we need a little time to do that. So just invite you to, if there's a pain, discomfort, to stay with it a little bit. And then eventually you can just feel the calming energy. I invite you to also look around your room slowly. Notice what is happening there. Noticing all of the frame, maybe a little, I don't know, ant crawling the wall, maybe a piece of cloth, piece of hanging. You can see beyond, there's a nature beyond you. Yeah, slowly. Let's say making contact, connecting, because we are not alone. We are always connected. And we women, as water, earth, we are, like, it's through that everything else is connected. Yes. If we women have had any other power, it will be the power that we got from the masculine energy, or maybe the excess of masculine energy. It becomes the power that is sharp cutting. But this is the power that woman has. All of us have this. Yeah, the power of the growing trees and the universe and the water and the earth and everything. That's the power we have of generating, regenerating. So that's my theme. All right, so then I come here and I'm just talking about the power of women lies in giving life while preserving her rights to exist. So can you feel that in your body? Your right to exist? In your feet? On the chair you're sitting with, or you're sitting on, sorry. Just, I'm here, I exist, I'm taking my place. Nobody can move me out of here because I'm the water, I'm the earth, I'm a woman, I exist. With my experience of working with healing trauma all over the world, I'm realizing that we cannot change our system that our systems that were created out of violence by thinking and talking about it. It's not going to be possible. The traumatic energy of the violence is still stuck in our bodies. Whether we are a woman, a man, trans, lesbian, gay, non-binary, and many other gender varieties not mentioned here, trauma is embedded in our body, nervous system, our cells, DNA, blood, bones, joint, and in our memories. So for the changes and healing to come, we need to listen to our bodies in order to liberate the excessive masculine energy trapped in it. Because I say masculine energy because when we are trying to fight with men, we actually become it. So I love that word I kept on hearing, surrender. I really kind of letting go of fight and kind of looking into these alternatives that we are coming into. Because fight is definitely masculine. Embrace is definitely feminine. So many of the systems that operates today are product of patriarchal systems. So I'm talking here. Look at how we are trapped. Education system, religious institutions, government system, medical systems, classism, this now it produces what? These systems here of education system, religious, government system, and medical system. It produces classism and economic system that is not equal. It produces competition. It produces racial and gender discrimination. That's the nature of it. And hence, here I put exclusion. So we're living always with. Now I think of Mother Earth. Mother Earth doesn't know how to exclude. So if we are claiming our energy, our power as women, we need to learn how to include. I've been doing my own work to heal my own system, to heal the patriarchal system that was actually put in my system. I know I inherited, I mean, I'm not from Europe, but I inherited some of the trauma that came from all those women who were burned. You know, I inherited so many women that were raped in all over the place that we all know. So it's all in my body, right? So when I'm able to, I work with somatic experiencing from Peter Levine, which is really gentle, so gentle. You just sit quietly and notice what is happening in the body. And as you notice what's happening in the body, we just let go. And sometimes we have some judgment, but then as you let go of excess energy of fight, flight from your system, you actually become less critical and you have new meanings of what is happening here. So I sit with somebody, it happens to me too, I'm working on my own. It's beautiful therapy because it's not like I am healing you. We are healing one another in this method. So I create this space where I sit void of judgments. Somebody could come with anything they have, but I try to make sure that I'm emptying my judgments off my head. No judgment. I'm not better than the one who is coming. I'm no worse than, we're just two women or two people here. And then I just kind of have that intention. This is a safe place for us. So I ask them to orient themselves to check if they feel safe. Then I also invite them to bring in their most precious resources that they can actually take with them so that it makes them feel safe. So over suddenly when they are looking around and they look at me, they imagine somebody else that they like being with them. They begin to drop, I just call it drop into the chair much better. They begin to feel their weight going to the chair. They said, oh, I feel a little bit more comfortable. I'm here with you. And then over suddenly they are letting go of the traumatic energy that they are bringing with them, especially when we have this fight energy or guilty energy or shame energy, all of that. So I'm just explaining very simple here. It's not so easy to teach. I teach this, but we have this half an hour, so I cannot go deeper than that. But I would just say that, that the most important thing we do here is to create this ambience that is safe by avoiding judgments, judgment and the attitudes that look down on others. Yeah. So I avoid those totally. And then we are embodied. We just stay in the body. We are not thinking about, what is happening there. We're just here In the present moment, miracles happens usually.